Wow, so many people showed up so early this morning. Thank you for getting here to be part of this conversation. I really appreciate your time and this opportunity. One of the things that I wanted to do was take a moment to acknowledge that we are on Indigenous land. And it is so important when we do the work of diversity, equity, inclusion, truth, and reconciliation that we take the time to really connect to the history and the peoples and the land and the resources that we are so abundantly blessed with. And so I know we're coming from different places in Canada, and I just want you to take a moment, just send your thoughts to the people who lived on the land where you live and who have been guardians for generations. Now, for me, home is actually Kenya, East Africa. So when I think of Indigenous land, I think of Africa as well, because it was colonized by so many countries and peoples. And there's so much history and so much that we don't talk about in terms of the land that I grew up on. So home can mean anything for you. So I'm really grateful to have this opportunity, and I'm going to invite you to be in a conversation. And so we will need a mic and a runner. At some point, I will be asking people to share their thoughts as I go through the presentation. As you heard, I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion specialist. I'm certified in that field. I've been doing that work for over 20 years, as well as sustainability and purpose work. I was trained in international development, working overseas in many countries around the world, and really understanding what bottom-up, people-inclusive transformation looks like. And I think one of the things that I'm really, really passionate about is helping us redesign how we create programming for others with them. And so that has been a theme of my work, understanding how do we do this well? How do we do this thoughtfully? And I love engaging in conversations with people who are part of these sessions with me. So if you'd like to connect with me afterwards, you can on LinkedIn. So the theme for today is Rise Up. And I took a minute to think about that. Rise Up. What a beautiful title for a conference. We've all been to so many conferences, and we sit there and somebody talk, and we might have some fun later. But I really want this to be framed as a game-changing conversation for the next 2 days for you. Really lean into it, sit up, ask yourselves, how do I as an individual in the sector that I work in rise up? How does my organization rise up? How do we rise up to make a difference in the lives of so many people? As I was thinking about it, I came across this quote, which I really love because I think it captures your reality. Difficulty calls us to rise up. And in that rising, we learn what we are capable of. Now, how many people would agree with me that you are in probably one of the most challenging times of the work that you're doing? How many people would agree? Yes. And there is a very strong call to rise up. And the question over the next 2 days for you is, how do we do that? What does the future of our work look like? And how do we design it in such a way that we're transforming lives? But before we do that, before we talk about how, and I have some thoughts around the how, I would love for you to connect with your why, because too many of us forget. How many people have been in this sector for 40 years? All right, 40 years, hands up, proud. You really put in the time. Okay, 30 years? 30 years, amazing. 20 years? 20 years in the sector of work? That's longer than marriages. Okay, 10 years? 10 years, wow. 5 years? And less than 2 years? Amazing, amazing. So the dedication that you put in this work is incredible. And sometimes when we do this work, much like myself, who I've been doing my work for over 25 years, I forget my why. So as we have this conversation, please turn to the person next to you and answer the question, why is this worth my life and my time? Why do I get up out of bed every day? What is it that makes me passionate about this work? What is my why? I just want to see from the crowd, how many people got super excited talking about their why? Yeah? Amazing, amazing. That's what I want to see, because you have to understand, I say this all the time, that we're not regular people. We are freaking superheroes. We are changing lives every day, right? When you see yourself that way, when you truly acknowledge the power that one person has through your smile, through your program delivery, through the problem you solved, through the way you help somebody, you are changing lives. And that is no small thing. So as we have the rest of this conversation, I want you to really feel that you are my superheroes. It's pretty amazing to look out here and see so many people who've dedicated so much of their lives to doing something worthwhile. And no paycheck equals the satisfaction you get from changing a life. So I would love to hear from one or two people, what is your why? Yes, giving back to your community. That's so beautiful. Giving back. That is not something that a lot of people think about. That's so beautiful. One more. Yes, the privilege of being able to do this work and make a difference. And I just want to talk about privilege for a second, because when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we hear a lot the word privilege thrown around. Privilege for me is partly obligation, a responsibility, right? To give back, to make a difference, to find ways to use our skills and our strength to make the world a better place. That's what I get out of bed for every day. And so I love it when it doesn't matter what color of skin you are, what orientation you are, what ability or disability you have, when we understand that we all have privilege and power and that we can make a difference, that's pretty cool. So thank you for sharing. All right, so now we're going to unpack the term rise up and have some thoughts around it that might guide your conversations moving forward. So resilience. I was thinking about this. What does resilience mean? It's a pretty amazing word. And in the last year and a half, I've been through a lot personally. And resilience is something that I've had to really dig into and lean on. So resilience, the ability to recover or adjust easily to change. Resilience. The work that you're doing is so important that you have to be resilient. But there's many ways, just like with diversity, equity, and inclusion, there's many ways to interpret what it takes to be resilient, what it takes to do diversity work, what it takes to be an equitable organization or an inclusive organization. And so let's take a minute to unpack resilience. And I'm going to offer two ways of thinking about resilience. The first way is to think about it as a reaction to the circumstances that you are dealing with. And so something happens, it's unforeseen, and all of a sudden you're rushing, like COVID, right? You're rushing, you're scrambling, you're trying to keep the doors open, you're trying to get your work done, you're under a lot of pressure, you're really reactive. The other way of thinking about resilience is to be proactive, to look further down the line, to see what is coming, to anticipate, and to align yourself and your priorities and your resources in line with what is coming. So I want you to talk to the person next to you about the two ways of looking at resilience: scrambling at the short-term things that knocking on your door, and the longer-term perspective of being really proactive. And I want you to reflect, how is your particular food bank or organization or way of working with your team or department, which way are you leaning? Where are you preoccupied most of your time? Is it in scrambling and surviving? Or is it in being proactive and looking further down the line? So understanding that there are evolving needs, and you need to anticipate and you need to be able to meet those needs and maybe find new sponsors for certain things, or just understand the needs of the community and respond to them, right? That's part of being resilient. Any other thoughts around resilience? Oh, all the way back. Love it. So resiliency requires a network. It requires strong relationships that you can call on. I almost started crying because that's exactly what I needed the last year as I lost my father and my aunt. When we experience loss of funding, of communities, of the ability to serve, resiliency requires relationships and networks, right? Beautiful. Couple more thoughts around resiliency. Yes, please. She's like, do they need me? Yes, we need you, Stephanie. Pass the mic on. So learn, right? Don't just survive it. What did we learn? What did we learn from COVID that went so well? What were the things that we did that worked? How can we scale that? How can we apply those lessons to other things? Now, here's the thing I know from working in international development. The timelines are crazy. The resources are thin. And when we go into survival mode, we don't have time, or we don't make time to reflect. What did we learn? How can we leverage that? What can we do better? And there's an organization that I love, Engineers Without Borders. One of the things that they do, which is really cool, is a failure report. They actually talk about where did we fail and what did we learn from that failure, and they create a conference around it every year just about where do we fail and what did we learn and what does it mean for our sector. So that's a really great thought there around resiliency. What did we learn and how can we apply it? Now I want to ask you a question, and maybe this came up around the tables. When we're talking about resiliency, there's organizational resiliency. Well, there's the sector, the organization that you're working in. There's you and your staff as individuals. And then there's resiliency in the community, right? There's multiple levels to this conversation. And so here's a question about the people that are delivering this work. Is burnout an issue? Is turnover an issue? Is like people going on sick leave an issue? Stress leave? Yeah, things are hard, right? So when we're talking about resiliency, we want to unpack that from the point of view of the sector. What does it take for us to be resilient as a sector? What does it take our organization? How can we learn from the way we've done things in the past? What do we need for our people? How do our policies and practices need to adjust to support our people? And I'd love to hear if there's an example of anything anyone has done to actually help with individual resiliency within your organizations. Because if not, the next time I come to speak at this event, it might be a smaller room of people, right? So resiliency of our people and then resiliency in the community. How is the work that you're doing supporting resiliency in the community? I love that there's a hand up here. All right, so we unpacked resilience. Let's talk about innovation. Innovation is bringing about new ideas, methods, products, services, and solutions that have a significant positive impact and value. I hear the word innovation a lot, but one thing that people don't understand about innovation is that there's two ways of doing it. One way of doing it is incremental change, right? I add in what I can, I fix what I can, but business as usual, and I'm doing micro things here and there. They don't have a huge impact on the sector or the problem that I'm trying to solve. That's one way of doing innovation. And usually that works if you don't have a lot of resources or, if you're just an out-of-the-box thinker as an individual contributor. But the second way of thinking about innovation is transformative innovation. You're not fixing something broken. You're actually saying, if I redesign this to get to X, what does that look like? That's visionary innovation. And more organizations that are succeeding are willing to put business as usual aside and say, let me think big. Don't tell me that this is how business has always been done and so this is how we're doing it. That never goes well with me. Don't accept that because somebody came up with those rules and ideas, and so we get to create and reshape them. And that's why being in a leadership role for me is so important, because execution is one thing, but if you don't have leaders who are visionary, what everybody else is executing on has less impact. And I was mentored by an amazing Indigenous leader. Mike Archie is a former chief in BC. And one of the things that Mike taught me over the 3 years that we worked together was the idea that, and he told me this through a story, that there was a lion that had a thorn in his paw, and he was really bothered by it, really upset, and he kept asking everybody, all the other animals, to help, and the elephant came, and the rhino came, and the giraffe came, and nobody could get this thorn out of the paw. Who got the thorn out of the paw? The mouse. So as a visionary leader, you don't have to have the vision. You don't have to have the answer. You don't even have to set the direction, but you need to create the conditions under which that mouse has the opportunity to share their perspective so that you can then execute on it if that's the right perspective. So your innovation requires a certain type of leadership, a certain way of thinking. And in many cases, an innovative leader, a visionary leader, is one who pushes against, I hate to say it, the board, right? And the funder and the, restrictions around what we can use money for and. They push against the boxes because they say, if my goal is X, there might be a better way to get to X if I just do this completely differently. So I would love for you to take a few minutes to reflect on this, the incremental way, staying inside of the box, small changes, not shaking anything up, and the visionary leadership way of doing innovation. And just think about, have we got any examples at the table of visionary leadership? Have we done this already in any shape or form in our collective experience? What did that look like? And it might be, I can't think of anything, but here's a solution, here's a problem that we really need to unpack and think about differently. So I would love for you to just take a few minutes to have this conversation at your table and see what comes up for you. Would love to hear from the room. What are some thoughts? What is some things that came up in your discussion about innovation? And there's a mic ready to go if we have a hand up. You hit on something that is so important to me personally, doing work as a change agent. How are people supposed to take the time to take something seriously if we don't let them know how bad things really are and how much we need their help? And how important their work is for us and how we're struggling, right? So as a consultant, when I've been brought into organizations that are fighting for funding with the Canadian government, I always say, do less, do it really well, and be honest. So I love that you're calling that out because it is so important. Oh, great. Another hand. You're such a great crowd. I love that you're all talking to us. Beautiful. Okay, so let's move on to sustainability. I like to say I'm certified as a sustainability expert. meeting the needs of the present without compromising on the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. That is more of an indigenous type of an approach to understanding sustainability. It's not what you're going to find in the sustainability certifications, but it's to me, this is it. How do we show up in our work today in such a way that we're contributing to a better future for tomorrow and not costing that future, right? And again, with sustainability, there are different ways of looking at that work. So one that you may be familiar with is when organizations have a sustainability program. Who here has a sustainability program? The other way of looking at sustainability, it's who we are and how we do everything, almost as a value. In everything that I do. Like today I was going to print and put on tables my QR code, and I said, do I really need to do that? I'll just put it on a slide. So everything that we do, where we hold our events, how we do our communications and posters, where we get our plates and cups and whatever it is, like, are we bringing sustainability as a skill and a lens to everything that we do? Is it something we're building capacity in for our volunteers, for our communications people, for whoever it is that does the work that we do, so that we shift an entire mindset around what it looks like to do this work from a sustainability perspective, right? And how many people are familiar with ESG? Yeah, not so many people. So in the world of sustainability, there are shifting conversations, just like in DEI and everywhere else. And so we talk about corporate sustainability programs, right? But ESG is the cutting edge. But ESG is a language that anybody who cares about sustainability should be looking into, right? And ESG is a framework that looks at environment, it looks at social indicators of reporting and performance, and it looks at governance. And each of those three elements have specific things that within your sector, because there are global standards around this, that you can measure. So as you're looking to report on your organization's performance and you're looking at ESG as part of your sustainability reporting, you can look at those guidelines and say, within my sector or a similar sector, what are the kinds of things that organizations are reporting on publicly? And it may be our footprint, our carbon footprint, but there's so much more to it, like pay equity, like human rights violations by you or your vendors or suppliers, like your governance practices, like harassment complaints within the organization or amongst your network. And so what it does, this was originally designed to be, if you are a government agency or if you're a publicly traded organization, you are supposed to do this. You're mandated to do ESG. It is big in Europe, it is big in the States, and it is moving into Canada. But what I love about ESG as a way of being and doing this work is that it raises our standards of what we think sustainability is. So while we don't have to do everything that's on all of the guidelines, it helps you answer the question, what didn't I know I didn't know? Because you're probably doing things that you're not reporting on that could really make a difference for people who are sponsoring you and doing work with you and collaborating with you. And I'm sure if you just did a whole day of sustainability around the room and just said, tell us what you're doing, you'd learn so much from each other and raise the standard of the whole sector in that work, right? But ESG is something to look into for sure. But just take a few minutes to talk about sustainability. Is sustainability a priority in the way you're thinking? Are you doing anything around sustainability? You can share that information with each other. Is there something in the way of you doing sustainable work? What's coming up for you? The last thing that I want to say about sustainability, and then I'm going to move on to two more before we wrap up, is that if you are looking for donations and support from the younger generation, they care not only about doing good, they care about how you're doing that. And so this environmental message is a really important one. It's a really important one. My kids want to know what you're doing on environmental stuff before they even donate their time, right? So something to think about as part of that when you're engaging the younger generation. And the other piece is we define sustainability differently in this room. So that's also another piece, is having language and a shared understanding of what we're talking about in the sector. You can address these things in different ways, but do we have the same understanding and same language is really important. All right, so let's look at the last two. This is my favorite conversation. Equity is a really big one. So ensuring that access, resources, and opportunities are provided for all to succeed and grow, especially the most marginalized. But some things to think about. One is that equality is not the same as equity. Do we all know that? Yes. Is there anyone who does not know that? Okay. If you're confused about that, ask somebody on the boat. Okay. Equality is not the same as equity, but it's important that we look at this work from two different ways of looking at it. One is, what is the equal outcome that we're trying to achieve? The outcome. So if you think about people going to dinner, right? The outcome is we want everybody to eat. We want everybody to be full at the end of the night. But in my family, my mother's a pure vegetarian because she's Jain. My father owns a steakhouse and loves a good steak, and I could do a bit of both. So what does it take for us all to be fulfilled at the end of dinner? Very different things. And so in order to achieve the equal outcome, we need to have an equitable approach. And equity requires it. First of all, equity equals fairness. And in order to be fair, you must understand the needs of the people you are trying to serve. And so needs analysis, data collection, intersectionality, truly building a 3D understanding of your community, which is why being a permanent member of the community is so important. You really need to know your people in order to be able to have equitable approaches that lead to equal outcomes for different groups of people. Because if I don't speak English, the additional service and support you need to provide for me to make your services accessible are required. Otherwise, I will not have the equal outcome of an English-speaking person coming to use your services. And so in order to be equitable, not only do you need to understand your community deeply, and data is a big part of that, and storytelling is a big part of that, you also need to have tailored services that respond to patterns that you see emerging in your communities. That's the equity part. Now, I could say a lot more on this, but we're going to move on because I have a hard stop in a few minutes. So up. So we did rise, now we're going to do up. And I really had to think about the U, but I think the thing that came up for me was being united. When you're under pressure, you're dealing with competition for resources, you're dealing with being in survival brain, it is so easy to turn against each other for that small funding envelope. We're competing. We really need to change the mindset to coming together and collaborating for a common purpose. So I love that you're spending this time together, that you've made the effort to be in the same conversation, and that you're going to start talking about systems and sectors and higher level thinking around the problems that you're dealing with, as opposed to me and my food bank or me and my organization, because both those levels are really important. But the question around, are we collaborating enough? How can we collaborate? What are new ways of partnering? Who are the new kinds of partners we should be working with? How can we have efficiencies from bringing our resources together? These things are really important as part of your longevity and also part of your ability to be resilient and to innovate. So as we come together, I wanted to land on and end on this concept of purpose. Purpose is what you stand for and how you plan to improve the world through your organization's work. And people talk about purpose all the time, but I actually took an organization through the entire process of discovering their purpose. And one thing I will tell you is that your purpose is not the thing you do. We deliver food in the community. That is not your purpose. Not if you understand the work of like the transformational aspects of being a purpose-driven organization. Okay? So you could, again, two ways of thinking. Your purpose could be we deliver food in the community for emergencies and keep people alive. Or your purpose could be really transformational. And to understand that, you have to understand what is it that the world needs in one part of the Venn diagram, and what is it that's unique about us as a sector or as an organization, and where is the overlap between what the world needs and what we do uniquely as an organization. And what that does, when you land on that, and there's an entire process to it, but when you land on that for your own food bank or your own organization, or even at the sectoral level, when you hit your purpose, A, it resonates with everybody. Everybody can see themselves in that purpose. But B, it guides transformational decisions and aligns your culture, your actions, your decisions in ways that actually catapult you. So with the last organization that I did this purpose work with in the tech sector, they ended up with $14 million of new investment and an entire rebranding, an entire new strategy that came out of the purpose work. So I just want to plant that little seed that you should always be coming back to. What does the world need? And within that and our work, what makes us so unique, so uniquely positioned that we are the ones that do it? And then how does that change the way you show up in the services you offer and the things that you do? Because it will unlock things for you that are just, you're looking for how do we succeed in the longer term? That's how you do it. Okay, well, I just wanted to end on this quote. It's inspired by the words of Martin Luther King. I think it really applies today. Let us rise up with greater readiness. Let us stand with greater determination. Let us move forward in these days of challenge, because we have an opportunity to make Canada a better nation. Thank you.